The first time he saw Caleb, Leo was crouched in a dark corner of the sterile room, limbs shackled, a hard plastic guard fitted over his mouth. The heavy steel door groaned open, and Caleb stepped inside, a figure silhouetted against the harsh hallway light. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, the crease in his trousers perfectly straight. A detestable human. The man, all sharp angles in a tailored suit, knelt in front of him. Leo instinctively recoiled, studying him with a mix of caution and curiosity. He twitched his nose. A new scent cut through the damp, antiseptic air. It was a good scent. A knot formed in his throat as he swallowed hard. His gaze fixed on the man with a greedy, intense heat. A beautiful, fragrant human. His teeth ached. He wanted to devour him. Caleb observed him for a long moment before peeling off his leather gloves and reaching for the bite guard. From behind him, a doctor issued an urgent, telling Mr. Vance that the restraint was not to be removed, that the subject would become violent and attack. The doctor's words were still hanging in the air when the plastic guard clattered to the floor. In that same instant, Leo launched himself forward, tackling Caleb and sending them both crashing down. He pressed his face into the man's neck, inhaled deeply, and then sank his teeth into the soft flesh. A sharp sting, then the warm, metallic rush of blood filled his mouth. He drank greedily. Caleb let out a muffled grunt, his hand coming to rest on Leo's waist in a loose, unresisting circle. He didn't move, submitting to the violation with a strange serenity. He even tilted his head, as if offering his vulnerable throat more completely. Leo was pleased by this reaction. A zombie as fearsome as him should be feared by humans. The doctor had cried out when Leo attacked, but a hand had muffled the sound before he was dragged from the room. Now it was silent, so quiet Leo could hear the rhythmic pulse of blood flowing from Caleb's veins. He worried he might have killed the man and pulled back, lifting his head. His eyes met Caleb's. The man was looking down at him, his expression calm. He asked if Leo had had his fill, if his blood tasted good. He raised a hand, wiping at Leo's mouth. His thumb came away stained crimson, which he then brought to his own lips and tasted. He smiled faintly, remarking that it wasn't very sweet. The smile dazed Leo for a moment. By the time he recovered his senses, Caleb's fingers were gripping his jaw. Caleb stared at his mouth and wondered aloud if the sweetness was inside Leo's mouth instead. The next second, Leo's eyes went wide with shock. This human dared to taste a zombie's mouth, to probe with his tongue. Who was the real monster here? This man was terrifying. The sensation left his mouth feeling soft, his mind dizzy, and his body flush with an uncomfortable, building pressure. Something was wrong. Caleb's mouth must contain some kind of poison designed for zombies. He was going to die. The heat and the swelling feeling had to be signs of his impending demise. He tried to scramble away, but Caleb's hand pinned his hips. He couldn't break free. His strength was draining away, the air stolen from his lungs. He couldn't breathe, his face turning red from the strain. This had to be a new form of torture. The cruelty of humans knew no bounds. When Caleb finally released him, his lips brushed against Leo's as he murmured, asking why he had become so clumsy, saying he used to be such a good kisser and now he didn't even know how to breathe. Leo didn't understand what he was talking about. He gasped for air, and before he had fully recovered, he scrambled off the man's body. The long chains rattled and scraped against the concrete as he half crawled, half tumbled back to his corner. Humans were truly terrifying. For now, the zombie was outmatched. He would fight another day. He collapsed in the corner, legs splayed, and looked down at the front of his pants. He smacked the rising bulge once. What was this? Go down. Now. He hit it again. Go down. Caleb rose from the floor and, seeing Leo's actions, let out a short laugh. He asked what on earth he was doing. Leo snapped his legs shut, his body rigid with alarm as the man slowly approached. Every hair on his body stood on end. He bared his teeth in a vicious snarl, trying to scare him away. Caleb loomed over him, reaching down to touch one of his pointed canines. He wondered if Leo still wanted to bite him. Leo clamped his jaw down on the man's finger. He looked up, meeting Caleb's dark, unreadable eyes, and saw his throat bob as he swallowed. He looked exactly like he wanted to eat a zombie. A whimper escaped Leo's throat. This human was a pervert. He hesitantly licked the wound on the finger before releasing it and shrinking back. No more biting. He didn't want his mouth eaten again. Caleb personally undid the shackles on his body and led him out of the research facility. Leo didn't want to go with him, but Caleb asked if he wanted to feel the sun on his skin. The zombie very much wanted that. Since being brought to the facility, he hadn't seen the sun once. 5 whole years. He didn't know who he was, what his name was, where he came from, or where he was supposed to go. It was as if he had forgotten himself. There was a faint feeling that he was supposed to meet someone, but he couldn't remember who, or if he ever did. As they walked out the main entrance, he saw the sign on the building, St. Jude's Wellness Clinic. He scanned the overcast sky for a long time before realizing he'd been tricked. There was no sun. Caleb was a liar. A zombie couldn't go with him. He glanced at Caleb's back, and when the man wasn't looking, he bolted. He made it 2 blocks before Caleb tackled him. Caleb undid his own belt, using it to bind Leo's wrists together. His voice was raw with anger as he told him that even after being so ruined, he still tried to run. He demanded to know where he thought he could go, asking if he had any place to go. He said that in his pathetic state, no one besides him would ever care. He called him a heartless creature. He said that just for letting himself get so broken after leaving him, Leo owed him an apology. He added that if he weren't so witless, he would have beaten him long ago. He tied the belt into a dead knot and hauled Leo to his feet. If he ever dared to run again, he would break his legs. Leo looked at Caleb's reddened eyes and felt he should try to soothe him. He opened his mouth, but the words caught in his throat. He hadn't spoken since he'd become a zombie. He thought hard about how to form the words, and finally, in a raspy, broken voice, he promised he wouldn't run, that his legs wouldn't be broken. Caleb held the end of the belt and led him along the sidewalk without looking back. His voice was hoarse when he said that if Leo dared to lie, he'd kiss his mouth raw. What a malicious human, threatening to kiss a zombie's mouth raw. It made the zombie feel afraid. But that was a lie. He wasn't really afraid of Caleb. He was a zombie after all. Caleb was just a fragile human. Brave zombie not afraid of humans. He clutched his shirt tightly, giving himself a silent pep talk. Caleb's temper flared. He pointed out that the water in the tub was getting cold and asked how Leo expected to get clean without taking his clothes off. Leo clutched his shirt and explained that they zombies didn't need to wash. Caleb gritted his teeth, retorting that if he didn't wash, he would stink. Leo insisted that they zombies were supposed to be stinky. He didn't like being cleaned. At the clinic, the doctors would strip him naked, put him in a small room, and spray him down with a high-pressure hose. The water was freezing. He hated being naked. He hated the hose. He had told them he was a zombie and didn't need to be cleaned, but the doctors at the clinic didn't believe him. They told him he was insane. Caleb laughed, though it was a laugh born of frustration. He informed Leo that his zombie had to be fragrant. He grabbed Leo's face, pulling him close, his gaze dropping to his lips as he delivered an ultimatum, asking fiercely if he would wash or not, threatening to kiss his mouth raw if he refused. Leo quickly covered his mouth. This was bad. It seemed the evil Caleb had discovered the zombie's weakness. He glanced from Caleb's mouth to the steaming bathtub, then back again. With a heavy heart, he pulled away from Caleb, pattered over to the tub, and flopped in with a splash, staring defiantly at him. Caleb sighed. He asked if Leo knew how to wash himself. Leo shook his head. Caleb walked over and knelt by the tub, beginning to wash him. As he lifted Leo's shirt, his pupils constricted. Leo felt a sudden, violent shift in the man's emotions, a suppressed fury that made him tense up in response. He watched Caleb warily, ready to bite him to death the moment he attacked. But Caleb only reached out a hand, his touch surprisingly gentle as he traced the intersecting scars on Leo's abdomen. Water welled in the man's eyes. Leo watched, fascinated, as it streamed down Caleb's face, dripping into the bathwater. Caleb kept his eyes downcast as he asked in a choked voice if it hurt. Leo tilted his head, asking who Leo was. Caleb froze. He looked at him with an expression Leo couldn't decipher. Shattered, fragile, trembling, on the verge of collapse. As Caleb looked at him like that, a sharp pain bloomed in Leo's chest. Caleb forced a smile, his voice raspy as he explained that Leo was the man he loved. Leo numbly clutched his chest, which felt like it had just been stabbed. He doubled over, crying out in pain. Caleb scrambled to help, rubbing his chest and murmuring reassurances, telling him it was all right, it didn't hurt. As he rubbed, the pain actually began to fade. This confirmed it. The evil Caleb had definitely poisoned the zombie with his mouth. The poison made the zombie hurt, and only Caleb's touch could make it better. The antidote must be on his person somewhere. He had to find the antidote, and then he would eat the delicious Caleb one bite at a time. The plan was perfect. Caleb was still rubbing his chest, growing more distraught as he did. He lamented that there used to be muscle there, firm and springy to the touch, but now it was just a layer of skin over bone, so thin he could feel his ribs. The zombie did not understand. He didn't know what chest muscles were. Caleb took his hand and placed it on his own chest, telling him to feel it. Leo felt it. Caleb asked him how it felt. Leo squeezed it. Felt excellent. While Caleb worked hard to wash him, Leo's hand never left his chest. He rubbed and kneaded the firm, pliant muscle. The zombie thought it was magnificent. The zombie liked chest muscles. By the time the bath was over, Caleb's chest was red from the friction. He finally pulled Leo's hand away, his voice hoarse, telling him that a few touches were fine, but he was overdoing it. He squeezed Leo's hand, him that any more rubbing would draw blood. Stingy human. That night, Leo lay beside Caleb, staring at the ceiling. Caleb's hand came down to cover his eyes. He told him to sleep. Leo stated solemnly that a zombie needed to touch chest muscles to be able to sleep. Caleb sighed, taking his hand and pressing it to his chest. He told him to feel it. Leo gave the muscle a squeeze and closed his eyes in satisfaction. Aside from poisoning him, Caleb was actually quite a nice person. He gave the zombie soft, clean clothes to wear and let him touch his chest muscles. Most importantly, Caleb didn't lock the zombie up. He didn't give the zombie injections or strap him into an electric chair. There was only one problem. Caleb was always trying to feed the zombie human food. After 3 bowls had been knocked over, Caleb pinched his cheeks and asked if he planned to starve himself to death by not eating all day. Leo knelt on the bed and looked up at him, gravely informing him that zombies do not starve. Zombies, he explained, ate people. Caleb laughed and asked if that was so. He squeezed Leo's cheeks tighter and leaned in, pressing his mouth against his. Leo's eyes flew open as he struggled and whimpered, forced to endure it. Caleb pinned his hands to the bed and continued to consume his mouth. Leo arched backward under the assault, his spine bowing until it felt like it might snap.
Humans.
So despicable. They were the ultimate enemy of zombies. Caleb kissed the zombie until he collapsed onto the bed, weak and limp. The zombie did not feel good. His body was numb and soft. He covered his mouth and angrily accused him of bullying a zombie, calling him a bad man. Caleb raised an eyebrow, showing no sign of remorse. He picked up a bowl of white, mushy human food, scooped some onto a spoon, and held it to Leo's lips. He gave him a choice: eat the food or eat him. Leo looked at the spoon, then at Caleb's wicked mouth. Defeated, he opened his mouth and accepted the food. He wrinkled his nose in disgust. Human food was truly awful. Wait, it wasn't awful. He looked with curiosity at the bowl in Caleb's hand. When the next spoonful was offered, he opened his mouth wide and ate it all in one bite, his eyes closing in contentment. Delicious, sweet, smooth, and warm. Not rotten, sour, or bitter. So humans had delicious food too. He knelt on the bed, mouth open, waiting for the next bite. The delicious food was slow to arrive. Instead, Caleb's lips and tongue found him again. Leo pushed against his chest, protesting urgently that the zombie was eating food, not mouths. Caleb licked his lips, then pulled back with a soft chuckle. He apologized, feigning innocence, saying he thought Leo had opened his mouth in invitation for another kiss. Leo was furious. He gave Caleb's chest muscle a vicious twist. He bared his fearsome fangs, threatening to eat him if he kissed him again. Caleb was just trying to poison the zombie, to slowly kill him. No one liked zombies. Humans only bullied zombies, wanted them dead. Zombies had to eat humans. Caleb reached out and touched his fangs, scoffing. He remarked on his small teeth and big talk, questioning how a mouth so small could possibly eat him. Leo paused, feeling belittled. He twisted the muscle on Caleb's chest again. Vile human. Caleb grunted, his voice suddenly going quiet. He pressed his hand over Leo's, his ears turning red. He rested his forehead on Leo's shoulder and murmured for him to stop, that he wouldn't tease him anymore, just please stop twisting. Leo froze. Something hard was pressing uncomfortably against him. He reached down, slipping his hand inside Caleb's pants, intending to remove the bothersome object. Caleb went rigid for a moment, then his beautiful eyes filled with a hazy smile, his voice raspy beyond recognition. He asked what he was touching, his gaze darkening as he told him to let go. Curious, Leo squeezed the object in his hand. Caleb grunted again, his Adam's apple bobbing, his face and eyes a lovely shade of red. He squeezed again. Another grunt. This was fun. Caleb was covered in a sheen of sweat, a vein throbbing in his forehead, before he finally captured Leo's wrist. He told him that this thing couldn't be squeezed like that. He slid his hand down Leo's arm, his large hand enveloping Leo's, and whispered in his ear, offering to teach him how to really play with it. The zombie liked playing with Caleb. He liked watching Caleb arch his neck, his eyes rimmed with red as he panted hotly because of him. But he did not like it when Caleb held him and called him Leo. It was he who was playing with Caleb. Why did he have to call out Leo's name? The zombie hated Leo. Caleb had been going out frequently lately. While he was gone, Leo would study how to escape the house. He couldn't open the main door and had tried to claw his way through it, but Caleb always returned before he could succeed. This time, however, it wasn't Caleb who returned. Leo was crouched by the door, claws extended, when he saw the man standing outside. His pupils shrank, his limbs grew icy, and his whole body began to tremble. Dr. Miles. The man outside wore a white suit, his hair swept back, a pair of rimless glasses perched on his nose. His gaze fell upon Leo, and he seemed amused by his fearful posture. A slight smile touched his lips. He greeted him, saying it had been a long time. A spasm racked Leo's body. Overwhelming pain and terror washed over him, and all the old scars on his body began to burn. It had started with Dr. Miles telling him he was sick and needed treatment. He didn't know what sickness he had, but he was terrified of the treatment. Terrified of the thick needles and the pain that seeped into his bones. Terrified of Dr. Miles's whip and his cigarettes. Terrified of Dr. Miles's hands and his eyes. Fear of Dr. Miles seemed to be written into his very DNA. He heard the sound of the door closing. The click was so loud it nearly stopped his heart. The light was shut out, plunging the living room into a dim gloom, just like Dr. Miles's little room used to be. Dr. Miles walked to the sofa and sat down, beckoning to him with a crooked finger. He called him a little dog and told him to crawl over. Leo scrambled on all fours to Dr. Miles's feet. After a moment's hesitation, he rubbed his head against the man's hand in a fawning gesture. Dr. Miles stroked his hair. He called him a good dog and asked him to tell the doctor if Caleb Vance had been inside him. The zombie didn't understand. He didn't know any Caleb Vance. He shook his head. Dr. Miles told him that he didn't like bad boys who lied. He seized Leo's face, prying his mouth open. The eyes behind the glasses were cruel and cold. He pointed out that his mouth was all swollen from being eaten. His gaze traveled down from Leo's open collar, lingering on the marks Caleb's kisses and bites had left. He commented on the signs of being cherished all over his body. Dr. Miles tightened his grip. Leo's cheeks ached, but he endured it, not daring to make a sound. Crying out in pain would only lead to Dr. Miles calling him disobedient and needing electroshock and whipping. He asked him to tell him if it felt good when Caleb kissed him, how he seduced him, how Caleb cherished him. With his mouth forced open for so long, drool trickled from the corner of his lips onto Dr. Miles's clean fingers. Leo looked into his cold eyes, trembling with fear, unable to speak from the pressure on his jaw. He could only whimper and beg for mercy. Dr. Miles's thumb rubbed his lips, and then he suddenly laughed, a sound full of malice. He remarked on what a pathetic sight he was, completely devoid of appeal, and wondered aloud how on earth Caleb could be interested in him. His eyes traveled downward. Or perhaps, he mused, he was different in bed. He released Leo, wiping his hand on Leo's face, smearing the saliva. Dr. Miles stared at him intently, his voice low. He said it had been 5 years, and he was beginning to wonder what magic he possessed to make Caleb so obsessed. After a long, scrutinizing look, he patted Leo's cheek. He told him to stand up and take off his clothes. Leo stood before him, his hands trembling as he undressed. Shirt, pants. Dr. Miles told him to take it all off. When the last piece of clothing fell to the floor, he stood there naked. Dr. Miles surveyed him slowly, as if inspecting a piece of fish. Leo shivered under his cold, cutting gaze. After a moment, he sneered, remarking that he was nothing special after all. Dr. Miles leaned back against the sofa and gestured to him. He told him to come closer, to kneel. Leo knelt before him. Dr. Miles stroked his face lazily, his voice gentle. He told him to unbuckle his belt. Leo lowered his head and obediently began to unbuckle the man's belt. He heard the front door open and footsteps behind him, but he didn't stop. Disobeying Dr. Miles meant punishment. It meant needles. The zombie did not want needles. Needles were very, very painful. So painful you wanted to smash your own head in to make it stop. A voice, trembling and laced with fury, suddenly cut through the air, asking what they were doing. It was Caleb. Dr. Miles squeezed Leo's ear and said with a lazy drawl that Caleb's little lover was quite skilled, and he was thinking of borrowing him for a few days. Caleb didn't answer, his breathing heavy. Dr. Miles looked down at Leo. He told the little dog to ask his master if he wanted to come with him. Leo felt his scalp crawl under that gaze. In Caleb's silence, he answered numbly that he would go with him. Dr. Miles smiled, ruffling his hair as a reward. He praised him for being so good. Leo continued to fumble with Dr. Miles's belt. Just as it came undone, a hand clamped around his arm, yanking him forcefully to his feet. A warm jacket was draped over his shoulders. Caleb swept him up into his arms and strode toward the bedroom. At first glance, his face was impassive, but his jaw was clenched, and his eyes were red-rimmed. Dr. Miles stood up, leisurely refastening his belt. He commented on how possessive Caleb was, unwilling to even share a toy with his big brother. Caleb stopped, stood for a few seconds, then abruptly turned and closed the distance in 2 quick strides. He kicked Dr. Miles, sending him flying several feet across the room. Caleb walked over and planted his foot on Dr. Miles's neck. He stated flatly that Julian should know by now that he never gave a damn about family. He told him to try and provoke him again. Julian's face turned red as he clawed at Caleb's ankle, trying to break free, but he was pinned down firmly. Only when Julian's face was turning purple did Caleb release him. He said that it took him 5 years to get him back, and Julian thought he could just take him. He warned him to get lost if he didn't want to die, that he was capable of anything. With that, ignoring the violently coughing Julian, he carried Leo toward the bedroom. Leo snuck a glance at Caleb's face and decided that right now, Caleb was even more terrifying than Dr. Miles. Caleb threw him onto the bedroom mattress. Leo rolled and scrambled up, trying to run. Caleb reached out, grabbed the back of his neck, and hauled him back, pushing him face down on the bed. He pulled off his tie and used it to bind Leo's hands behind his back. He held down his legs and unbuckled his own belt. He demanded to know who took his clothes off, Julian or himself. Leo struggled frantically, twisting his head to try and bite him, but it was useless. A sharp crack echoed as Caleb's belt landed on his backside, stinging with a fiery heat. Caleb's tone grew heavier. He repeated the question. Leo bit his lip, refusing to speak. The cold leather of the belt traced a line up his spine, tapping menacingly against his lower back. The anticipation of the pain was worse than the pain itself. Caleb asked if he did it himself. The belt was raised again. Leo's pupils constricted. He saw an image of Dr. Miles raising a whip, and he screamed in terror that it was him. He did it. He tried to curl into a ball, begging him not to hit him. Caleb looked down at him, his face half hidden in shadow, his voice dangerously soft. He asked why. He said that if he so much as touched him, Leo tried to bite him to death, yet when Julian told him to take his clothes off, he was so obedient. He knelt there, stark naked, in front of him. A hysterical laugh escaped Caleb's lips. He asked if he pampered him and held him on a pedestal just so he could strip naked and crawl before someone else, letting them defile him. He demanded to know what Leo thought of himself and what he thought of him. He raged that he wasn't just degrading himself, he was degrading him. His voice was laced with a pain that was almost tangible. He couldn't believe Leo would dare to unbuckle Julian's pants right in front of him, asking if he thought he was dead. He warned him not to think he wouldn't strike him just because he was confused, that if he ever let anyone mistreat him like that again, he would whip him to death. The raw fury radiating from Caleb terrified Leo. With his limbs restrained, he was powerless to resist. He felt as if he were back in that dark clinic, dragging heavy chains, tethered in a corner. The doctors would shout just like Caleb, hit him with whips, and then push him to the ground to give him injections. Or they would drag him to the electric chair and pour ice water over his head. People would constantly tell him he was sick, that he was sinful. He was so cold, and it hurt so much. So he would let his trembling body go limp and allow them to torture it. And then he wouldn't feel the pain anymore. He became a zombie. Caleb finally noticed his trembling. He turned Leo's face toward him and froze when he saw his expression. The overwhelming rage drained out of him like a flood tide receding, leaving only a heavy, suffocating anguish. He asked hesitantly if he was afraid. Afraid of him? He seemed at a loss, his hands trembling along with Leo's. Something shattered in those beautiful eyes, the sharp edges piercing his composure and turning his scara red. Leo wanted to reach out, to soothe the sorrow in his eyes, but pain and cold wrapped around him, creating a barrier between them. He told himself 100 times that he wasn't afraid of him, but his body was numb and cold. Sometimes a zombie couldn't control its own body, its own emotions. He was locked inside his own skin. Caleb looked defeated. He cupped Leo's face, wiping away the tears. He told him not to cry, that he would leave. His voice shook. He asked if that would be all right for him to go. He pleaded with him not to be afraid of him, that he was leaving right now. Caleb untied the tie binding him and pulled the covers over his body. He picked up the belt from the floor and staggered out of the room, not looking back. Leo lay on the bed, watching his desolate figure retreat. He opened his mouth, wanting to call out to him, but no sound came out. "Don't go. Please just hold me. I'm so cold." When he woke up, his head was fuzzy and his body felt limp, heavy and hot. The poison was probably taking its final effect. He felt a little sad. He slowly got out of bed and knocked on Caleb's door. He told him the zombie was going to die. Caleb sighed and touched his forehead. The hand was cool and felt very nice. Leo instinctively rubbed against his palm. When Caleb pulled his hand away, he craned his neck to follow it. Caleb held the back of his neck and pressed his forehead against his. He chuckled softly, telling him it was just a fever, and reassuring him that he wouldn't let him die. The doctor was someone Caleb had called. Leo heard him tell Caleb that a shot would bring the fever down faster. Leo was suddenly wide awake. He watched the doctor take out a syringe and fit it with a familiar-looking needle. He immediately shot up from the bed and made a break for it. Caleb caught him with quick reflexes, asking where he was going. Leo stared nervously at the syringe in the doctor's hand, clutching Caleb's arm and shaking his head. He didn't want it. "No needles." Caleb tried to soothe him, telling him not to be afraid. He explained that he was sick, and a shot would make him feel much better. Sick. He was sick. Leo stared at Caleb's face, and it blurred, morphing into countless other faces. Dr. Miles, other doctors whose names he didn't know. Their eyes were always cold as they told him he was sick, that he was sinful. Then they all merged into the face of Dr. Miles, holding a syringe and smiling at him. He said that sick people needed treatment. Caleb held him on his lap and pulled his pants down just a little. The needle pierced his hip. He tensed from the pain. When the needle was withdrawn, he struggled out of Caleb's grasp, clutching his backside as he jumped off his lap. He shot him a venomous glare. He called him a bad man, that the zombie hated him. Then he turned and stomped upstairs. No more being friends with Caleb. He was one of them, just like Dr. Miles. Caleb also thought he was sick. He needed treatment. He hated treatment. He couldn't explain to him that he was a zombie. So while Caleb was out, he managed to get the door open and ran away. He wandered the streets all day but still hadn't managed to eat anyone. The scents of the humans were a chaotic mess, and the zombie had no appetite. None of them smelled as good as Caleb. That evening, he found himself back near Caleb's big house, staring at the lit window. He clutched his empty stomach and started to miss the fried chicken Caleb had given him. He was hungry. The villa door opened. He quickly hid behind a tree. The cook, Maria, came out and tossed a box into the bin by the curb. She sighed loudly that the mister wasn't coming home for dinner again, and it was such a waste to throw out all this good food. Then she went back inside and closed the door. The lights in the villa went out. Leo swallowed. He waited for 2 minutes, and when no one came out, he excitedly ran to the bin, grabbed the box, and scurried back to the bushes. He squatted on the ground, rubbing his hands together and whispering that it wasn't a waste. The zombie would eat it. A short laugh seemed to echo in the darkness. He looked around cautiously, but seeing no one, he settled on the ground and ate the delicious food. It was still warm. That night, he curled up in the bushes to sleep. Just as he was about to close his eyes, the villa door opened again. Maria came out and tossed a sleeping bag near the bins. She muttered that this sleeping bag was just taking up space, so she might as well throw it out. Leo shot up. He waited until Maria went back inside and the lights were off before he went to retrieve it. He sat by the bushes and fumbled with it for a while before he finally managed to crawl inside. He sighed in comfort, mumbling to himself that the zombie was so warm now. The zombie liked the sleeping bag. His sleep was restless. He kept feeling something tickling his face, and he dreamt that a big dog was licking his mouth. After licking him, the big dog opened its mouth and spoke in a human voice, calling him an idiot. The zombie was very offended. Caleb seemed to be just wandering around every day. Leo followed him quietly, picking up things he dropped. Piece of candy, a bag of chips, packet of wet wipes, and a photograph. There were 2 people in the photo. One was Caleb. The other he didn't know. Caleb was wearing a blue and white uniform, a small ID tag pinned to his chest that read, Northwood High, Grade 11A, Caleb Vance. The other person's tag read, Grade 11A, Leo Foster. He pocketed the photo and looked up to see Caleb's back disappearing through the gates of Northwood High. By the time he followed him in, Caleb was gone. It was a weekend, so the campus was empty. He wandered aimlessly, looking around, when someone tapped him on the shoulder. He turned. A young black man with a wide smile stood before him. The man exclaimed that it really was him, that he thought he'd seen wrong. He asked where he'd been all these years, saying he never came to the class reunions. Everyone asked Caleb, but he wouldn't say anything, and then Caleb stopped coming too. He had heard that Leo didn't go to the same college as Caleb, and everyone was saying they'd had a falling out. He said he didn't believe it because Caleb would never have let him go. The human's friendly, familiar tone made him uneasy. He took a step back, swallowed, and said that he wasn't Leo, that he had the wrong person. He hurried away. Walking down a hallway, he stopped at the top of a staircase. He had a sudden vision of the corner below. A younger, cockier Caleb was slinging a backpack over his shoulder, his uniform worn with a sloppy indifference. He was confronting someone, saying so he was Leo Foster, the one who'd been writing his name down. Leo Foster glanced at him, then returned to his notebook without a word. The vision of Caleb scoffed, exclaiming that he was doing it right in front of him, that the kid had guts. The wind rustled through the corridor, and the image dissipated. On an impulse, he went upstairs and found his way to room 11A. He stared into the empty classroom. Through the window, he saw another vision. The teenage Caleb kicked Leo's chair, his attitude belligerent. He asked how much Mr. Weber was paying him to babysit him, questioning if he really thought he could keep him in line. The scene shifted. Caleb had his arm around the other boy's shoulders. He was asking Leo for help with a math problem. He lowered his voice, telling him that as his desk mate, he was only allowed to help him, not anyone else, especially not the class president. He hissed that he must have noticed she liked him, and since he didn't like her, he shouldn't lead her on. He tweaked Leo's ear, telling him to behave himself and stop flirting. Leo slapped him with a book. He clutched his face, accusing Leo of domestic abuse. Leo smiled. The voices in his head grew louder. Every step he took brought new, fragmented visions. Proud, defiant boy. Cool, quiet boy. Leo, what college do you want to go to? Leo, can you tutor me? Leo, do you think I can get in? The same college as you. If I start working hard now, can I make it? Leo, you're so good. You even patched up my cuts. Leo, I'll never get in a fight again. Just don't ignore me. Leo, I like you. You're such a good kisser, Leo. Have you kissed other people before? You can't kiss anyone else. From now on, you can only kiss me. He was smiling, but water started streaming from his eyes. He walked through the laughing, shouting phantoms, his body leading him up to the roof. The door to the rooftop was ajar. He pushed it open. Caleb was leaning against a wall, smoking. He looked up, and a flash of panic crossed his eyes when he saw Leo. He quickly hid the cigarette behind his back and stubbed it out. Leo felt as if he had crossed a great expanse of time to stand before him again. He realized, in a daze, that Caleb had grown up. His throat was dry. He swallowed and started walking, then broke into a run, crashing into Caleb's chest. He wrapped his arms around him, burying his face in his neck and breathing in his scent greedily. Caleb's scent. So intoxicating. He wanted to eat Caleb. He only wanted to eat Caleb. He opened his mouth and gently bit his neck. Caleb's fingers threaded into his hair. He chuckled, asking if he was trying to kill him again. He gently pulled him back a little, looked into his eyes, and told him that this wouldn't kill him. He would show him how. He told him he needed to take off his shirt and bite lower. He took Leo's hand and pressed it against his violently beating heart. He said that the heart was here. Then he guided his hand lower. And life, he said, was here. He asked if he remembered now. He smiled, a roguish grin. He invited him, his darling, to come and kill him. Leo thought for a moment, then started to pull at Caleb's shirt. This time it was Caleb who was stunned. His ears turned red as he grabbed Leo's hands, laughing. He said he was just kidding, just playing. If he wanted to bite, they could do it at home. This wasn't the place. His smile faded a little. He squeezed Leo's hands. He told him to stop running, to please come home with him. He asked if he wasn't tired, after running for 5 years. Home. The word sounded so warm. The zombie liked home. The zombie was willing to go home with Caleb. As long as Caleb believed he was a zombie and promised not to give him any more injections. He looked at Caleb and said plaintively that he wasn't sick. Caleb agreed he wasn't sick. He told him he was a zombie. Caleb agreed he was a zombie. He said he didn't want any more needles. Caleb agreed no more needles. He said he didn't want to be hit. Caleb said he wouldn't hit him. He said he didn't want any more poison. Caleb agreed no more. He paused, frowning. He asked when he had ever given him poison. Leo looked at his mouth. He explained that his mouth had poison in it. It would kiss the zombie until he was hot and numb. The zombie did not like it. Caleb stared at him for a moment, then burst out laughing. He said he couldn't take it. How could he be so cute? He cupped the back of Leo's head and brushed his lips against his. He asked if Leo would feed him some poison. Then, Leo was a little worried. He asked if he would die from his poison. Caleb explained with a straight face that he wouldn't. If Leo kissed him and then he kissed Leo back, the poison would be neutralized. So, every time Caleb kissed him, he had to kiss him back, or they would both be poisoned by each other. He reminded him that he had kissed him 3 times before, so now Leo owed him 3 in return. Leo didn't believe him. Caleb was so childish. But Caleb was looking at him with such an expectant expression. He looked at him for a moment and decided he was willing to humor him. He tilted his head up and kissed Caleb's mouth. Once, twice, 3 times. Caleb grinned from ear to ear, looking incredibly happy. Leo looked at him with pity. Sigh. Caleb was so silly. When they got home, Maria greeted him, holding his hands and fussing over him. When Caleb wasn't home, Maria would chat with him, teach him how to cook, how to garden, how to paint. Maria also gave him little pills. She said they would cure the zombie poison. Once cured, he wouldn't have to be afraid of Caleb's kisses anymore. He would even become smarter than Caleb. The zombie liked the little pills. A few days later, he started dreaming. He kept having the same dream. A rainy day, Caleb's red-rimmed eyes, his hand gripping his wrist, refusing to let go. He was yelling that he didn't accept the breakup, that he didn't accept the pathetic reason that he just didn't like him. He demanded to know if all their kisses were fake. He didn't believe it. He knew he was lying. He dreamt of Caleb pinning him against a wall, kissing him with a desperate, frantic energy, searching for any flicker of the affection that used to be there. And in the dream, he remained cold, indifferent. He told him cruelly to stop being crazy. He told Caleb he had never liked him. Monitoring his studies was an assignment from Mr. Weber. Being with him was just a whim because he was rich. He said he really didn't like being kissed by a guy. It was disgusting. Caleb's body went stiff, all his pride crushed underfoot. He lowered his head. He said that was really cruel. Then he let go. He told him to go, just go, and never let him see him again. He would wake with a start, finding himself held tightly in Caleb's arms. Caleb would pat his back, gently soothing him, telling him not to be afraid, that he was there. His sleepiness increased. He started needing several naps a day. One afternoon, he woke up to voices from the kitchen, a hushed conversation drifting in. It was Maria. She said that based on the information from hypnosis and his current condition, his breakup with him 5 years ago was likely not voluntary. She was just stating the facts. 5 years ago, Leo's father had accidentally discovered his relationship with Caleb, possibly even witnessing them being intimate. His father believed that liking men was a sickness. After forcing him to break up with Caleb, he had him committed to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. There, Leo encountered Caleb's older stepbrother, Julian. Julian abused his position to torture him, destroying his mental state. He then convinced Leo's father that he had gone crazy and should be sent to a conversion therapy center. And there he stayed until Caleb found him. Maria sighed. She said Caleb's little sweetheart had severe psychological issues. His belief that he was a zombie was a self-preservation mechanism. She said just hearing about what Leo had gone through was hard enough to bear. For him to have survived such a devastating ordeal and still be here, he was truly strong. Caleb was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded like it had been scraped with a knife. He promised he would investigate further. Maria told him not to let Julian get away with it, that Leo was terrified of him. Caleb choked for a moment. He said he didn't understand. Julian was his brother. Why would he do that? Leo had done nothing to him. Maria gave a cold laugh. She said one shouldn't try to understand the motivations of an animal. She added that while Julian had no grudge against Leo, he was his half-brother. She asked, perhaps tactlessly, if his dear brother had known all about his relationship with Leo back then. Their conversation was too long, the information too much. His head started to ache. He just knew it had something to do with him. When Caleb came out, he felt guilty, afraid he'd be caught eavesdropping. He quickly shut his eyes, pretending to be asleep. Caleb brushed his hair back from his forehead and kissed it gently. He took off his shoes and squeezed onto the small sofa with him, holding him tight. He was sorry, he whispered. So sorry he hadn't protected him. So sorry he hadn't found him sooner. Cool tears fell onto his face. He buried himself in Caleb's embrace. He didn't know why he was crying or why he was apologizing. But it was all right. If you're sorry, Caleb, then I forgive you. Ever since bringing Leo home, Caleb had been collecting evidence against the conversion center. After the people involved were arrested, his lawyer brought over a flash drive. He explained that it contained video recordings of their treatments and that there were files pertaining to Leo. He asked if Caleb wanted to see them. The flash drive sat on the desk for 3 days. Caleb didn't touch it. On the 4th day, he finally braced himself. Before opening the files in his second-floor study, he called Maria. He told her that if he lost his mind and tried to go out and kill someone, she had to stop him. He said that Leo only had him, and he couldn't afford to get into trouble. Downstairs in the living room, Maria hung up the phone. She snipped a withered stem from a vase and handed a fresh flower to Leo. An hour later, the sound of things smashing came from upstairs, one crash after another. Leo looked up curiously and asked what was wrong with Caleb. Maria replied without expression that he should pay him no mind. He was just having a fit. Heavy, urgent footsteps thundered from the 2nd floor. Maria glanced up and told Leo that when Caleb came down, he should grab him, hold on tight, and kiss him for all he was worth. A strange request, but whatever Maria said was right. The words had barely left her mouth when Caleb stormed down the stairs, his eyes red, radiating a murderous aura. Maria tried to block him but was shoved aside. He told her to stay out of it. Caleb was in agony, consumed by a burning hatred. He was going to kill them. He swore he was going to kill them all. Maria frowned and tried to grab him again, telling him not to be impulsive. He insisted he wasn't being impulsive, that he was perfectly calm. He shook her off like a raging beast, singularly focused on getting out the door. He snarled that they were all animals, that they deserved to die. How could they live after what they did to Leo? Maria clutched her bruised arm and yelled to Leo to get him. Receiving his orders, Leo launched himself forward, tackling Caleb and pinning him to the floor. He lay on top of him, then looked to Maria for his next instruction. Maria walked to the front door, smiled at him and said to kiss him. Then she walked out and closed the door behind her. He looked down at Caleb. His eyes were bloodshot, his breathing ragged. He was gritting his teeth, tears streaming down his face. Leo leaned down and kissed his eyes. He asked what was wrong. Caleb's hand came up, trembling, to touch his face. He asked if it hurt. Leo blinked. He said he wasn't in pain. Caleb could no longer hold it in. A sob broke from his throat. "But it hurts me so much," he choked out. "Why? Why would they do that to you? How could they? How could they bear to?" Leo held him, thinking slowly. He was beginning to understand. Of course they could bear it. Because they weren't Caleb. Why couldn't Caleb understand? In the end, only he couldn't bear it. He thought Leo was a treasure, and so he naively believed the whole world should treasure his Leo too. Julian Miles conducted pharmaceutical research but was not a licensed physician. The concoctions he had injected into Leo were half-finished products from his private lab, primarily intended for psychiatric treatment. The chaotic mix of drugs coursing through his body had caused unbearable pain. Maria told Caleb that it was unlikely he would ever fully recover to the way he was before. She said Leo might remain simple-minded for the rest of his life. Caleb had just smiled. He said that sounded fine. Caleb seemed to have calmed down. He no longer shouted about killing people. But 6 months later, Julian Miles fled the country to escape charges of illegal drug sales resulting in a patient's death. A month after that, he was killed in a shooting. Caleb found my father in a card room, told him he was sick, and had him committed to a psychiatric hospital. These were things Maria told me. I tried my best to listen, to understand. I thought about it slowly came to accept it. Maria said Caleb didn't want her to tell me. He was afraid I would remember the past and not be able to handle it. He was also afraid I wouldn't understand and would just worry myself sick. But she knew I could. She knew I was learning, trying. She said that one day I would accept this world. Accept the suffering, accept the love. Accept myself. She asked me if I wasn't the toughest little zombie. I smiled, a little embarrassed. Maria said that happy zombies become human. She told me that once I became human, she wouldn't come around anymore. I thought about it. When I saw her off, I told her she didn't need to come back. Caleb came home through a blizzard, telling me that the new year was coming. Fireworks exploded against the dark night sky. A new year. Caleb held me and asked his little zombie what his wish was. Warmth seeped into me, inch by inch, filling all the cracks. Caleb's body was broad enough, hot enough, to bring a cold corpse back to the world of the living. I said, "Caleb, I'm not a zombie." "Then what are you?"
I'm Leo. I'm Caleb's Loa.